I'm Ben Mankiewicz. That is... I was going to call you Jason Siegel. What is wrong with me? I'm Ben Mankiewicz. That's Jason Rubin. This is TYT Sports. A couple of stories today about inter-ESPN conflict, or at least conflict about ESPN. So we'll start with Bill Simmons. Simmons is in trouble with Mike Golic. I want to preview this by saying I am 100% on Bill Simmons' side.
Good man.
All right, so tell us, Jason, what happened with Simmons went on Colin Cowherd's show.
Right.
Mike Golic and Mike Greenberg reacted to it, and then Simmons went nuts.
Right. So we have some tweets from Bill Simmons, which we're going to throw to you right now, as there's a camera in my way that I cannot see it. So here we go. Bill Simmons says, "What Mike and Mike did today was absolute garbage. I would say I lost respect for that show, but I never had it," as he links to the article.
Okay, so let's tell people, though,
what happened.
What happened? All right.
So as you said, Simmons went on Cowherd's show, and Mike and Mike took Simmons out of context completely, and they
didn't really take him out of context. They just added no context to something. Like it didn't misrepresent what he said. It's what he said, but it made it seem in a limited picture as if he was making some grand statement when it was just hey, this just occurred to me. Here's an interesting aside. I think of it like this.
And in addition to that, Bill Simmons made, I thought, a very strong comparison when and this is all about how LeBron James and the Cavs are struggling through their first 4 games of the season.
Simmons, being the basketball nut that he is, has watched those 4 games, and he also watched most of their preseason games because the Cavaliers were obviously such a compelling story to see how they would do. And he made the point that LeBron looks different, that he's lighter, that he does not look like the same player. He basically said, I know it's only 4 games, but it's also the preseason, and something looks different. And he said, maybe in 20 games, this will be nothing. But right now, he looks different, and then he made a comparison
to Albert Pujols
in his first season with the Angels, where he just clearly was not the same player.
Right.
Even though he was a nice player last year, but he's not the player he was in St. Louis.
Right. So let's actually start with Mike Golic's comments from Mike and Mike.
They play the limited part on Mike and Mike. They play the part of only about the Pujols comparison.
Yes.
And Golic reacts like this.
And he says, "I think it's one of the most ridiculous statements I've heard 4 games into a season in my life in any sport." That's what I'll say about Bill Simmons.
Okay.
He continues, "So he grabbed a headline, which is something I know he loves. And that's one of the most ridiculous lines I've ever heard in any sport in my life.
Calm down.
4 games into a season, I don't even. That's ridiculous." And then the quote ends with, "I put nothing, 0 on that." But before that, if you listen to from the big lead, has the clip on Mike and Mike, he literally starts going, "Stop, stop, stop." And then he says, "That's ridiculous, I put nothing, 0 on that."
I mean, first of all, it's funny. You can argue, even if you take Simmons out of context, the only really the person overreacting to anything is Mike Golic.
Right.
Like that's the what does he say? That's the most outrageous thing he's heard in sports in 20 years?
It's one of the most ridiculous lines I've ever heard in any sport in my life.
A casual observation that maybe LeBron with the Cavaliers this year reminds him. He didn't even say he is. He just said reminds him.
Different.
Yeah. So anyway, Simmons did so.
He fires back.
So Simmons fires back, and I tell you what, I'll hold my fire. What does Simmons say?
Hold your fire. So going back to that first tweet, what Mike and Mike did today was absolute garbage. I would say I lost respect for that show, but I never had it. For an ESPN radio show to pull an interview out of context from another ESPN radio show, then play the moral authority card is disgusting. Have the balls to call me to discuss it on the show. Damn straight, Bill Simmons. Don't pull it out of context just because you need a fodder for a segment. Pathetic. And then I thought this was fantastic, but hey, I'm just a guy who can't evolve, right? And then links to an article from ESPN probing the gray areas of ESPN's journalism that came out about Bill Simmons.
Yeah, so the context, of course, to all this is Bill Simmons is mad. And he's mad that he got suspended for 3 weeks, and he's mad that he wasn't able to talk about it. And so he's very angry at his bosses. And I think he should be angry. I don't think he should have been suspended for 3 weeks. I think that in the grand scheme of things, if you're going to protect journalism, this is a more egregious sin, employees criticizing each other publicly. That said, I wouldn't suspend anybody. I'd sternly talk to the people involved and just say, hey, look, you think this is good radio? Well, I mean, we're talking about it. I guess it is the big picture. I can't believe we're talking about a fight, an inter-ESPN fight. It does not matter. But here's what does matter. if you care about sports the way I care about sports, and many of you do not very clearly care about sports the way that I care about sports, but there are insiders and outsiders in the sports world, and they have in the sports journalism world, and it is a business that has been dominated overwhelmingly by insiders. And Bill Simmons comes along, a guy who never played, who wasn't part of the club at all, and he's an outsider. And he has analyzed and tackled sports in an interesting way, and a way that I think that a certain breed of sports fan, of which I am, of which Jason is, and which millions of us are, was desperate to see. Mike Golic, I don't know him, I've heard that show a little. That show is the kind of show that's been on sports radio for fucking ever. It's not a bad show. They are totally competent. Greenberg in particular is a very, very competent broadcaster. But that show is a sports show, and it's ordinary, and they have takes, hard takes, and they stick to it. Bill Simmons is the sabermeticion's sports guy, always has been. The 30 on 30 documentaries are terrific. Grantland is incredibly interesting, really the first effective blend of, first effective smart blend of sports and pop culture, and the love that we have in sports, that we also love the same kind of TV shows and the same kind of movies. And
I find the BS Report, his podcast, to be one of the best, not just sports podcasts, but one of the more interesting things to listen to in your car anywhere you go.
And Bill Simmons, the reaction on ESPN, basically of insiders, in the report that we both read, suggested that most people at ESPN seem to be on Bill Simmons' side. There did seem to be some sentiment, however, that everything that Bill Simmons does has Bill Simmons in mind. Well, you know what? He's Bill Simmons. You're not Bill Simmons. You should protect yourself. He's protecting himself. So I'm with him. I know a couple people who know him. I've never met him in my life. They like him. I like him.
He's a fan first.
He's a fan first.
That's what I like most about Bill Simmons.
He's a fan first, but he's reasonable and he's thoughtful. And most shows, and I don't know, I'm not into ripping Mike and Mike. I don't know, but I know every time I hear Mike and Mike, I think, I know this show. I heard this show. I heard this show in 1980. Right. And those guys are insiders because they're former players, and there's and what I got from Golic, and maybe I'm wrong, and we'd love to have Mike Golic on. By the way, they've all apparently talked, and Golic said,
Golic said we figured it out.
He figured out. Well, Golic said one honest thing. He's like, I hated what he said about my show, and I like that. Good for Golic.
That's fine.
Right. But there is and it works with sports writers who resent Bill Simmons because he didn't go the route that they went. He didn't cover locker rooms. You don't have to cover locker rooms. It's okay. You can still write about sports. You can cover politics if you never went into politics. And Golic, so it's not just from sports writers, but Golic is also of that breed of players. Like, you didn't play, you didn't earn it, fuck off. You don't have to have played at all. In fact, it's good that you haven't played. In fact, in the booth, in play-by-play radio and television booth, stop putting former players in there. Stop it, stop it. Some might be good, but it's a job, it's a professional job, being a broadcaster, and most of them aren't good at it. There are a few exceptions. Troy Aikman has become a broadcaster, I think. But there are some others. But by and large, let broadcasters broadcast. It doesn't matter if they play. They've watched it, and their job is to convey it to the audience. So anyway, the end result is, on Bill Simmons' side, it's nuts if they suspend him again. And he is clearly somewhat desperate for it, and there's a lot of speculation about what he'll do when his contract's up next year.